Well, good morning and welcome to this week's Jump webinar. As you can see, Howard isn't with us today. He has transformed through the power of technology into me. So welcome everybody and thank Yes, this is AI at its finest.
Amazing.
So welcome everybody and thank you very much for joining us today on what's going to be a very special version of the Jump webinar today. We have had a great deal of demand for this and we're really pleased to welcome our guest for today. So Sai, welcome. Let me just introduce Saeed Bohr, known to all his friends and even to those people in Jump as Sai. And Sai runs a business who specialise in operational excellence. And he's going to talk to us today about operational excellence, about recruitment processing, about data, maybe even about AI. So I've got a series of questions that I'm going to ask Sai. No data for you, no statistics to open up with. We're going to go straight into questions with Sai. But please, if anybody has got specific questions that we're not covering or things they really would like Sai to answer about processes, about leverage, AI, automation, anything to do with operational excellence, please pop them in the chat box or in the Q&A and we'll try to answer those live. And I did get Sai's permission before I invited you to give us live questions. We're more than happy to do that. And Paul and Dave, I hope you two learned something too, but by all means pop in if you've got something valid to say. But I'm really excited about this one. I think we're all going to learn something from this. So
I'm taking notes like everybody else, Heather.
Excellent. Okay, so let's get cracking then, Sai, with the questions. So these are questions that Sai kind of is hearing out in the stratosphere at the moment. Okay, so it's not why was Trump elected, although we're all going why was Trump elected. But so let's start us off with something straightforward to get us going on operational excellence. What is a process, Sai, and why do we need them?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I mean, like a lot of agencies I speak to will say, "Oh, we're not very process driven. You know, we just, we're very good on the phones. We know what we need to do to get it done." But actually, for me, a process is the steps that you follow to achieve a specific outcome, and usually it's something that everyone is able to do within the business. So even for folks who don't think that they're process driven, don't have an entire bank of standard operating procedures and process maps with lovely chevrons and arrows, you probably do have a process sitting within your business. It just might not be documented. And I encourage folks to try and document processes, mostly because there's always an opportunity to actually measure it and make sure it's getting the outcome that you want. And having it documented also means that when we're adding staff, hopefully folks are still adding new members of staff. It's easier to onboard folks, and the positives far outweigh the negatives on it. But yes, a series of steps and actions that you take to achieve a specific outcome, usually with the associated software and systems you're using alongside it.
Okay, lovely. Nice and simple introduction. It's great. And I think sometimes we can overcomplicate things, can't we? And we can get kind of scared of it. But a series of steps, something that you can measure, it's a lovely way of describing a process. So where do we start? How do we start document or mapping our processes?
Yeah. So I do a lot of process workshops, and actually I think a lot of folks expect us to be sitting down and looking at systems and clicking through things. I actually try to get away from laptops and also away from desk side and get into some meeting rooms, whiteboards or flip charts, and actually we try and draw it out. Actually it's so interesting that you can get 2 or 3 people in the room and you ask them to draw it out on different whiteboards in the room. There's always a general common thread, but there's always a little bit of nuance in what everyone does. So for getting started, if it's whether you're a solo recruiter or whether you're a 50-person business, get in a room and document what you think what your processes look like. Really visualizing it. I think it's using a whiteboard's good, right? Because you can rub out, re-add, and so on and so forth when you're looking to redesign it or redefine it. But it's just walking through every step. So candidate acquisition is one that comes up loads. Everyone, you ask the question, well, what's your candidate acquisition process? Where do you get them from? That one's always an interesting one because it's never a straight line, because as we know, we have candidates from job applications, from LinkedIn, from headhunting, and so on and so forth. But actually drawing it out like that helps you visualize where do all your candidates come from. And a really interesting thing that we get folks to search is, where did your last 10 placements come from? Because actually people sometimes have stuff in the process map, and then you look into it and actually no candidates come from here. Then you can do wonderful things like, oh, well, how much does that cost us to have? And do we need it? Cost efficiency, or operational cost efficiency, is so important this year and last year, probably more so than it's been for a long time.
And it's amazing, isn't it, what falls out of that activity of just getting on a whiteboard in a room with people and brainstorming, and physically drawing out what you do. This is a slightly side question to this side, but it occurred to me, do you have a view on some of the online whiteboard products? Have you used those kind of, because we're often not in the office with people, so have you used any of those whiteboarding?
Miro is very good. Miro. That's a really, really, really good one that you can, if you're on a webinar type thing, you can actually all work off of the same Miro board. So actually you can have someone on one side, someone on the other, and then drag around between the two. I don't know, I don't know if it's an age thing or not, but I actually still love being on site. And actually I just find you get so much more out of folks when you've got them in a room. I try and not start any engagements that are sort of retainer based without like a full on-site day or two. And I have put several thousands of miles on my car this year, even though I promised my other half we were only getting it to go to see my dad once a month. But yes, Miro is really good. There are so many good shared workspaces. Notion is one that, Notion is so diverse with what you can achieve on it. You can run mood board style stuff on there, and then you can house your SOPs on there and your process docs on there as well. So Notion and Miro are probably my two favorite products for something like that.
Interesting. So those are the two I've got experience of as well. So Miro, I think it's amazing. I absolutely love it, and I love the fact that you can use it. There's a free version that's really powerful, so you don't even need to spend any money to really understand the value of a Miro board. I think that's brilliant. Notion I've got less experience of, and I found it quite personally. I found it a little bit more difficult. It's a little bit more technical, and you need a little bit more. So whereas Miro, you can kind of just do it, can't you? And then a lot of people I don't think they know that on the iPhone now there's a free version of Miro, isn't there? There's a free form that's actually everybody's got on their iPhone.
I didn't know that.
So there's a free version of a Miro. I used it for doing all my Christmas planning with my kids last year, and I created a free form that we could all share about what everybody wanted to eat and where everybody wanted to be and all that kind of stuff. So that's a really good free version of it. So Dave, were you going to say something there? You were looking.
No, Dave's going to ask you what is an iPhone. Is what he was about to ask
you. Yeah, I've got an abacus thing, and it's big.
You can't brainstorm on that.
What's the feeling like when you get a group of recruiters together in a room, and you're there to take them on that journey? Are they nervous about what you might help them find, or are they excited about, okay, this is really good? How does it feel being in a room like that?
Do you know, anyone that is, I try and make sure that individual contributors and team leaders or managers are not in the same group, because that dynamic never works too well. With the recruiters, I really do have to preface it by saying, we're not here to dig anyone out on what they're doing. I like to use, the quote that's been evolved over the years of you can't improve what you don't measure. And I really try and get across the point that what we're trying to do is measure what we're doing at the minute and work out, actually, is there an opportunity for you to nick an extra CV out the door or an extra interview or some more pipeline. So really prefacing it that we're not here to critique, we're here to improve, and this should add value to your pipeline. Managers and people that lead organizations, founders, etc. if there's ever any pushback on wanting to do it, I always ask, well, how many members of staff do you have? Okay, and how many hours do they work in a week? Okay, so the sum total of effort that's being applied to this process that we can't actually document or articulate, does that sound good to you, that there's X thousand hours or X hundred hours being spent on something that you couldn't even articulate now? So actually that really does sometimes bring folks back in the room, and they're like, that's a good point. Actually, we do pay the wages of our staff and they do work 40 hours a week and we performance manage them, but we don't clearly know what we're asking them to do with that 40-hour week. So two different angles, but definitely in two different rooms, if I'm honest.
And that context is so important, isn't it, for getting them to engage in the process, that understanding what you're doing it for and what's in it for them, to helping them to engage. I think that's great. And I love the example you gave of the candidate acquisition piece. I think we've been involved in that sort of exercise before, where you're working out how much it's costing you to bring
absolutely
for every successful placement, and where your candidate's coming from. And so often that does throw out, exactly as you described, the places that we're spending money that we're never getting candidates. And also the places that we've got that we miss.
And do you know what's really interesting is actually so I pulled the source of the candidate from their database first. And then I asked them in person, whoever's deal it was, where did this candidate come from? The disparity between what gets logged on the CV versus actually where they came from. I can't remember, was it, Adzuna? And obviously because it's an A, it's the first in the drop down. So all of it, I went to one agency and they were doing like 9 out of 10 deals were from Adzuna. And I was like, wow, Adzuna, really? I've not heard of anyone doing deals from Adzuna. And they were like, oh, no, that's just the first one in the drop down. So I think because they made it a mandatory field, the recruiters were just going, Adzuna.
It figures. Yeah. Just a point. What you're doing is, I guess, giving people the view that it's about fine lines. It's not moving 100% further forward, but it's, as you've just mentioned, if you can find an additional CV or two, as an example, that could be the difference between increased success every week or month or not. And I guess it's that level of detail that's going to give people that opportunity. It's not necessarily expecting people to radically improve or radically change, but it's just providing them with those fine lines, the opportunity to increase productivity by a smaller percentage in certain key areas that makes the big difference.
Yeah, although if you stop spending money on Adzuna, that could be a game.
Yes, that's also a great point, isn't it?
Cool. So talking about CRMs and databases and where you're getting information from, Si, how do we get more out of our databases?
Yeah, so really, CRMs and databases are, something that I'm not ashamed to admit that I'm very passionate about. I worked a contract enterprise tech desk, ERP, CRM, and then into the IT service management market, and very quickly just realized that actually there's like 100 contractors in my market that I just need to be on top of and know what I'm speaking to them about. So my reason for really enjoying and adopting a database as a recruiter was because I couldn't remember everyone's favorite football team. I couldn't remember what their kids' names were. So I used to do it to capture like real qualitative information that I could use to help build relationships, sound familiar the next time I called. From then to now, the emergence of coding and skilling has, that's come on leaps and bounds. Long gone are the days where you have like auto skilling and auto passing, because it's just pointless. If anyone has that turned on, do turn it off ASAP. So for me, how do folks get value out of their database, get more out of the database? There's two things here. I think it's the performance data that you can get out of it. So actually logging the activities that allow us to look at what activities lead to which results. And then again, we're measuring it because we want to improve it. We're measuring it because we want to find maybe some skills gaps to train you. And then the other side of it is the CRM data piece, where it's the quality of the candidates, the ability to reach the right candidate at speed. It's an interesting one when you go to different agencies. There's so many different opinions on what the CRM should be used for. It should no longer be just a place to log placements. It should be something that contributes to making you a faster delivery person, a better person on the phone to your client contacts, BD contacts, prospects off the back of the data that's stored in it, and specking CVs. It's like a big part of business development. It's probably losing its power because everybody has access to sequential messaging these days. So actually, it's now more important to be better on the phone and build relationships. However, speccing to the right contacts about the right niche skills that they struggle to hire, because you have coded up all your candidates to know what that looks like, to know what the niche skills are in the marketplace, and bringing them together. So if you want to drive value from your database, do more deals out your database, start by coding. And don't just code broad things, like coding a candidate to say that they're an ERP person is pretty pointless. If they work a specific module, which is rare, maybe that should be the code. If it's drivers, maybe it's a specific class of drivers that is quite hard to come by, with a combination of maybe a nationality or a language skill. You've got to work it out in your own market. What is the toughest thing to find and what is a hard thing to find? Usually things that are hard to find in recruitment command better rates or quicker deals. Did I answer that question? I feel like I lost a lot. Yeah.
No, you definitely answered that question, and I could see from Dave and Paul's faces that it's ringing bells with us. So it's something we talk about in Jump all the time.
Absolutely.
Is that using your CRM, leveraging your data, really understanding the power and the value of the data that you've got in your business. This isn't on our list of questions, so apologies that come in this, but why do you think that we keep having the same conversation about data quality and leveraging data? What is it about CRMs and recruiters that they seem to use drop downs and just take ads sooner and not do it? And what do we do about that?
I think it's an education thing, and it is a bit of a cultural thing. I work with one agency who are a Nordic tech recruitment agency, and they use Vincere. Vincere's got talent pools and distribution lists. Wow, they are so, they're very verticalized. So, they have a software development language as their vertical, and they know what skills they need. They know the versions, etc. So they just have distributions lists that are constantly growing of target people that they need that they want to do business with, and then these talent pools that are constantly being worked, contacted, coding updated, etc. So I think it comes down to like education. Like they have a really strong culture of that. Speccing is a big culture, and if you want to spec well, you need good coding, or you need to know what people want to buy, and you need to know what people do. Coding is the best way to go and get that in your system. So I think if you have a strong spec campaigning culture, if you want that to be delivering the results you want the coding to go alongside it. Most of the time it's people aren't leading from the front. I've implemented CRMs before, and one of the pieces around adoption is keeping users accountable, and that's got to come from multiple angles. I think it has to come from founders first. I don't think founders need to stand up in front of the office and say, I've just spent 100 grand on this bit of kit, so use it. But I think they need to explain the business case behind spending that money and what was the outcome we wanted, and educate people. And then the last bit is there's never really any consequence, right? Your biggest billers get away with not having to put it on there. They're not good role models. It's the usual stuff. But I always recommend not paying commission. Like if a CV was
that's a controversial.
Always, if a CV was sent on the same day that an offer came out, I'm gonna say that that's not a properly run through process on there. But then there's loads of stuff you can do to mitigate that even happening. If you're having weekly pipeline reviews, monthly pipeline reviews, you should be doing it with the database in front of you first, so you can look at it and go, right, that's on there. That's on there. That's moved along. That hasn't. Why is this person not coded? Larger agencies now get their ops managers to run QA checks, which I love. I think it's great. I think someone needs to be the database police, and just keep an eye on what's going in.
I'm from a big agency background as well as small within big, but and absolutely 100%. If it wasn't on the database, if it wasn't on the CRM, it didn't happen.
Exactly.
Right? If it's not on there, it didn't happen. And you absolutely try getting commission paid out on a deal that hadn't been run through the proper, because we understood as a large organization, we had so many measurables that we could demonstrate. If we have not got good data, all of these processes that we've got, all the AI, all the messaging, all of those things don't work, right? Waste of time, waste of money. In fact, they're counterproductive. So I'm with you. I mean, obviously I would be, wouldn't I? HR process, but yeah, Sorry, Dave, you were going to say
I
something.
was going to say though, so you're so right. So many owners or leaders will say, I or we have just spent 80 grand on this
Yeah.
to make your lives better. So please use it. And
Yeah.
there's no jeopardy. And there's just a sense of guilt. Okay, I better use it. And most consultants will say, well, it didn't work properly. I've had my training session, or I was away from my training session. I'll just see what, so-and-so next door to me is doing. And all that money is just sitting there, not being used as effectively as it could be.
Yeah, I mean, it
Owners
is
get frustrated and the consultants are frustrated.
totally. It's seen as an admin chore, and it's always been that way, unfortunately. And as you rightly say, Si, it comes down to educating people to recognize that if you log things correctly, it will ultimately make you more productive and more successful, make more money for the business. But I think that the other element to what Heather was just saying isn't just the fact that it allows us to collect data to really be able to manage our businesses effectively. It's also about the fact that increasingly clients need us to provide them with data. And of course, if we don't have accurate data internally, we're at a disadvantage, particularly against those agencies that are using data now effectively to inform and instruct and educate their clients. So this is no longer, and I think it's always been this way anyway, but it's certainly no longer a question of, well, we may or may not do it. I think it's an absolute imperative. And the last point I'd make is that for business owners who are thinking about ultimately selling their businesses, a failure to have accurate data, to have a really good, well-equipped CRM is going to cause you a problem when it comes to selling the company.
People used to, when I first started recruitment, I went to my first client meeting, and I remember the chap I went to the meeting with wheeled out. We took 3 CVs printed out with us, obviously, because that's what you do when you go to these meetings. But then we also led with like this flagship number of, we've got over 300,000 candidates on our database. It's like people are so much wiser to that now. They want to know. One of what happened the other day to a consultant at one of my clients went in, said, "Oh, I've got 100,000 of these people," and the internal TA person wires to it now just went, "Brilliant. How many of them have you spoken to in the last 6 months?" It's just like that is the true value of the database. If you haven't spoken to them, it's just a store of information. So I think the value in your business is definitely going to be derived from actually the niche skills that you've identified that exist in your database and how recently they've been spoken to. Data is your friend was the name of my last presentation I delivered, and I strongly believe it.
Yeah, and it's all about education and communication, isn't it? So consultants have to understand why we're asking them to do this and what's in it for them as well as for the organization, or then just not going to play. So what does a good data workflow look like then?
Data workflows, yes. So recently I was looking at an agency's database, looking at their candidates in particular, how well people were coded, skilled, but also what hot list they lived in. And then I went one step further and was looking at the note types and the qualification notes that were going in. I think now with the amount of AI tools that can capture your notes, and you can even now set templates for these things to fill in. So you can actually have a candidate qualification template filled in by an AI note taker. I think it's criminal that we don't have better quality data going in. So with the data workflow, we started with looking at particularly where are we capturing this data from folks? And then it was a real opportunity for us to improve the quality of the qualification calls that were taking place. So, a lot of the rookies that you see out there a lot of the rookies won't ask those direct questions. I think we don't. I'm not sure if it's a societal change or a generation change. We will ask some surface level questions and then never really, probe any further. I used to do a training session with the grads that we used to hire on peeling onions. And so we'd do role plays. And every single time I said something that they thought could be an onion to unpack, they had to draw an onion on the board and we'd go and unpack it. And it was like, I feel like we've lost that consultative level of qualification in not all agencies, but certainly in a lot of the ones that we're seeing out there. So for the data workflow, we started at the beginning and said, well, how can we get better at actually capturing better, more relevant data? So there's the nice stuff around there, like me, I like the football teams, I like the kids' names and so on and so forth. So yeah, we capture all of that stuff, but questions like asking questions like your impact on projects, not just where you worked, and the real mindset thing around if it's just information from a CV you're about to type into this note box, pretty pointless because we've got the CV already. So what is the new
And
stuff
so
that
is
we're going to get
everybody
on?
else, right?
Yeah, and so is
Everybody
else.
else has got the CV.
So you
Exactly.
have no competitive edge. You know, your competitive edge is what you've got stored in your data and your ability to get good quality information from human interaction. So we started on there, and actually that turned into a whole training piece. You know, it was more of a skill issue than anything else. Like, how do we capture more? And then we looked at where does this data need to go? So we've used things like automation. Bullhorn automation is great for sending surveys afterwards, and then reading and writing back into fields. So some of the stuff that you just need confirmation of, like, you know, can you just confirm your salary or confirm your base salary? You know, you could just whip that in an automated form that goes out afterwards for them to confirm and fill in. But spending the time on the phone asking the really qualitative, the questions that get you the qualitative answers around what impact they've had in places, what makes them a good candidate, what niche skills do they have, where would they like to work, where else are they interviewing, all of this stuff that we need. So we used to look at that, and so it would go into a note type. Oh yeah, I feel like we could talk about CRMs all day. So note types, you know, I met an agency yesterday, phenomenal. They've only launched like 9 months ago, and they've got 6 headcount already. You know, they're on their way to hiring more folks probably in Q1. And they only have one candidate call note time, and it just says candidate call. And I looked at him and I said, "Oh, that's an interesting setup." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Well, what about like interview feedback, and what about interview prep or compensation calls or offer calls? Wouldn't you want to, you know, categorize your note types by this so that you could access this later?" So, well, why would you want to do that? Well, I say, well, in 3 months' time, if you have another person interviewing there, and you can go look at the interview feedback notes, and you can find out what the format was, what the questions were. Not that we'd give the questions away, but, you know, find out generally how the interview is structured. Would that add value? Would that make the next placement a little bit easier? It's like, you know, you see the light bulb go off, and people are like, right, actually, that would make my life a lot easier. So we then looked at how is that data stored against what note type? How is the note information categorized so we can access it when we need it in the future to help us make more placements? And then the lead information, we would do the journey for the lead. You know, that in Bullhorn, it goes into leads and opportunities, and other systems it goes elsewhere. So the data flow was around that. Where is it going? What's it meant to be used for? Because there's no point capturing it unless we're actually going to use it. And that was the mindset that we had to have when we were discussing the data workflow for this agency. Why do I capture this information? Is it going to be useful? What's it going to be useful for? And is it in a place that I can get to it quickly? And does everyone in the business know how to get to it quickly? So that's the data workflow piece that I've done most recently. And I think I'm going to do more of it. I think I'm going to go speak to more folks, because I do think that there is a real skill piece at the beginning that could be really, really impactful for businesses, and then do the flow.
Do you feel
because it feeds absolutely into the way we're training people, right? It's really and how we're onboarding people into our businesses when we hire them in the first place. It's got go do more of it. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I was about to say something similar, Heather. That I think it talks to the fact that people aren't educated in the basics of recruitment when they don't understand the values that you've just outlined. Why do you need this information? Why is that important to you? How useful will it be? When will it be useful to you? I mean, these are in many respects the basic pillars that you learn, as Heather's just alluded to, when you start out in recruitment. So the fact that they don't get that when it comes to putting stuff on the CRM would to my mind, there's a connection. They don't if they don't understand that, then they really don't understand the basics of recruitment. So I think it's a deeper subject in many respects.
And I sometimes, if I'm honest with you, I do think that the agencies are doing the training sessions. Maybe they're not testing the fact that it's gone in as such. But I think what happens is I think you probably are aware of why you're doing it to a certain extent, as much as you can be when you first get started and you've had the sessions. But then a week or two goes by, then a month or two goes by, then you're behind target, then you're expected to have billing numbers on your head. Then it's the performance management piece that I think ruins the mindset of the recruiter. So if it's stick, then all of a sudden we're chasing KPIs and numbers, and you lose sight of the quality stuff. I literally had a conversation yesterday with someone saying, we know we have the benchmark KPI numbers for all the activity levels. We've got someone that's just consistently not hitting it, feeling like they're a little bit lackadaisical, I think was the word that was used. Good words, very good words. And actually my suggestion was, let's go back and just follow on the quality of the activity, because actually if the activity it's the activity that gets you the KPI. So why don't we just go focus on the quality of specking, or focus on the quality of the qualification calls, and just like be on top of those for a week, because then we know if we're on top of those that's getting better, ratios improve, you get more output off the back
and
of
I
it.
love that approach, Si. I love that approach, because too often it becomes about the quantity. It's just hitting the KPIs without remembering that the quality is such an important part of whether or not those KPIs are worth having at all. So, which moves us really nicely, well done, into the next question, which is, if we are talking about performance management, and there is always a performance management part of that kind of whole data journey, what are the best products that you've come across out there for performance management?
Yeah, I have no affiliations with these guys, but I feel like I have to say that now because I shout them out everywhere I go. But I'm a really, really big fan of OneUp. I think it's the most simple thing to use. It connects to most databases. So OneUp has the ability to have the gamification stuff. You know, you can run missions, leagues, summer incentive progress, etc. Loads of like that stuff on it. You can have leaderboards. You know, you can have whether that's your call times, or you can have the total count of activities, or you can have the performance against target. I think we are visual people, and I think it helps to have just a. I mean, the agency I worked in had 2 pages of screen times. If you were ever on the second page, God, you were just like, God, I can't even go for lunch yet. I need to get myself onto the first page. But I don't think we need to go down that route. But certainly, if you know that your business is light on first interviews, or is light at latter stage processes, and you know the activity that's going to lead to that changing or that improving, you can just pick 2 or 3 metrics every week that you can just put on the screens and focus on. And I just love
what's that
this.
software called? Sorry, say that again.
OneUp. Yeah.
OneUp. Okay.
OneUp.
Fantastic. Not come across that.
Alternatives are like Bullhorn have analytics, which is equally as good on the analytics side, but less on gamification. But I feel like bringing a bit of competition back in, and doing a bit of peer-to-peer competitions, and also using it to shout out people and show gratitude for the good stuff that they're doing is really important. So OneUp as a product, it's not even that expensive either. I do think it's just so good, value for money.
Interesting.
It's amazing, isn't it? When big organization I've worked for in the past, when we started to put those sorts of 1 or 2 metrics on the desktops of everybody when they came in the morning, and a couple of league charts and that kind of stuff, it was amazing to hear the way conversations around the office changed, the way people focused on different things, and you could really influence how people were spending their time just by carefully choosing what were the metrics that you were going to have. And as you say, visually really, really important to do. So yeah, that's good. I'm going to go away and investigate that.
You can link it to some of the cultural stuff that you're doing in the office. Last week there was one of my clients on a Monday that I go in every Monday. They were running a Halloween league, and it was amazing. It was like, you know, they split into 4 different teams, witches, wolves, and whatever they were, and they ran a competition amongst themselves, and they put in a couple of Halloweeny type activities in the week as well. So it's a combination of recruitment activity plus some of the stuff that they were doing culturally anyway, internally from the social side. So yeah, connecting the two, you know, making performance management really, if you can have performance management involved in some of the social stuff and involved in just your day-to-day, I think it will help, because doing it every week is one thing, but actually having it on the screens every day, it's almost like a performance management partner of yours.
Yeah. So an interesting question we've got from the audience that links to that, which is how would you implement OneUp, for example, in a remote workplace? So if you're not all in the office, will it work in a remote environment?
Yeah, really good question. If you are large enough that you have an external IT provider, you can have your browsers set to always open to a certain homepage. So I think you can even do that yourself by Googling it or YouTubing it. But OneUp have dashboards. So it's a web application actually primarily. So you can have consultant level dashboards, company dashboards. You can choose who sees which dashboards, which leagues, which competitions. So whilst you won't be able to have the slideshows necessarily on the web application, you can still have all the leaderboards. You can still have all the dashboards for people to have in front of them. So lots of folks I know have OneUp and don't actually have the screens up. Loads of people. They actually use OneUp, especially that consultant dashboard, as the weekly check-in. So it's like, right, let's sit down, let's have our quick 15-minute catch up. What's the plan for this week? And they just open OneUp and go, right, that was good last week, this was good last week, need a bit more of that, that needs jobs. You know, you can use it to help plan and set your day up.
They're using it as a way of drawing the data out, to be making it visually simple. These are the things we're focusing on, and kind of driving behavior in one-to-ones.
Yeah, exactly that.
Okay. But we can absolutely use it in a remote environment.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, Lauren, I hope that answered your question for you. Thank you for that. So how do we then improve performance through data?
Yes, it comes back to that. You know, you can't improve what you don't measure. So I'm on a journey at the moment with an agency who didn't use their CRM very well for this year, and we probably started using it and tracking it and ensuring people were using it in September. So I think by the time we get to the end of November, we have 3 months of data or everything going on there where we can start maybe trusting some of the ratios. Ratios show us the skill level we're at, right? The rest of the skill level we're at, or the quality of the stuff that we work in general. But the activity stuff is meant to get us to better ratios. So for me, it's all about ratios, CVs to first interviews, for folks that are certainly early into their careers in recruitment. The ability to send a relevant candidate who then gets an interview is huge. It's the first part of the funnel. If you nail that, then you know you're off to a good start. So using data for me is ratios, and also looking at where are the improvement areas. So when I do ratios, I don't just look at the recruitment specific ones like CV, interview, offer, final. I like to look at the end to end, so like total dials through to revenue books, and try and build that out for businesses. Because there's something that you can learn from each of those pairings as you go through. So we did it last week with 2 groups at an agency, and it was brilliant seeing them. They were like, you know, you get them to do it, run the workshop internally and get them to do it, and say, right, so you're viewing loads of profiles on LinkedIn, but you're not sending so many messages. Why is that? And what can we do to improve it? You know, things like, well, my searches, the results are rubbish, so they're not relevant, so I'm not messaging them. Then you move down the ratio and go, emails being sent, no one's replying. What are you saying? Who are you saying it to? You know, there are things that cause these ratios to not be optimal, that are sometimes so obvious, and actually you just need the visual in front of you to go, okay, I'm not getting this result. What's the one before? What do I do differently here to get the better result? So you looking at your workflow ratios from like the tools that you're using, LinkedIn, the telephone, email marketing, whatever it may be, and the results you're getting, because it all is meant to feed further down the track. We don't do email marketing campaigns to potential prospects to not generate business development meetings. So, you know, you can clearly draw the ratio there and look at whether that's a acceptable amount. So that's my piece around data to improve performance. Look at every ratio, activity to pipeline to money on the board.
Yeah, so across the board, all ratios, I think what you're saying, but also what's really important in what I've pulled out from what you said there, Si, is linking it back to what's the change. Why is that data showing us what that data is showing us, and what do we need to do differently? So is it like your LinkedIn searches are rubbish? Well, we have to change our LinkedIn searches then. How do we make them better? So it's not just looking at the data on its own, it's linking each section of our process that we mapped right at the beginning, and saying how are they influencing each other, and what are the things we need to change at what stage, because as we all know, sometimes they're surprising, right? So then we think they are, and it's not where we think we have to make changes. Brilliant, thank you. So last question on our list, unless we get any others coming from our audience, is how well can we assess our operational processes? So how do we know when our operational processes are performing well?
Yeah, so I think once you've gone through the exercise of designing all your standard operating procedures or process docs, is whatever you might decide to call them internally, when designing those, please be really clear on the outcome you're looking for, and implement a cadence that suits your business to review them. So go through, a lot of folks I recommend it quarterly, just have a little look through what was the aim of this? Are we actually getting that? It kind of ties back to the ratio. Sometimes you'll have a process for sourcing on LinkedIn. There might be a process doc or how-to guide on that. You know, that links back to the ratio. The ratio is poor. Let's review operating procedure or our process for sourcing on LinkedIn and look at why it's not actually delivering the result we want. But 100% having a cadence that works for you and reviewing them and just seeing, okay, we're not getting the results out of this, and just what's the word that they call it? Autopsy, post-mortem, go through it and work out where it goes wrong. But you
love
will...
a true crime documentary.
Yeah. And if things are going, and on the flip side, if things are going really well, like, it's equally as important to review what's been working really well, because actually can we have more people doing more of the stuff that works and less people doing less of the stuff that doesn't.
And that's wonderful, actually, because very often we forget when we get into these things that we're looking at what's gone wrong, what could we improve, rather than having just as much time celebrating what worked really well, what were the successes that came out of this, and then building on those. So I think that's a really interesting point of view. That's brilliant. Cool. Okay. Well, listen, that's brought us to the end of the questions that we had set. So if anybody's got any other questions, please quickly type them in. And Si, have you got anything that you kind of want to end on in terms of, how do people get hold of you if they want to talk to you more? Or...
Yeah. You can find me on LinkedIn. My name's Saeed Boor. That's Saeed, and Boor is Bor. I have been doing this consulting gig for about a year or so, and I would say, actually, when I was looking at folks that do something similar, Jump were actually one of the first businesses that actually jumped up. But I know you guys operate at a much more strategic and advisor level, and I met Jump through the team network, which has been wonderful. But I've learned so much in this year just by speaking to other people, bumping into Howard at various events, and Dave, I see you guys at various places. My number one thing to anyone who is having a tough time, always having a good time, doesn't matter what you're experiencing, keep networking with people and keep talking to people, keep showing up to these webinars and stuff. Like, I join my peer networks, webinars all the time. Every day is a school day. I like to make sure that I'm always networking and always learning. So the thing I'd leave for anyone, my number one tip to anyone that I've found has helped me massively this year, is that network and keep learning.
And we are always open to informal conversations, as I'm sure you are. People want to contact you through LinkedIn, contact you through Jump. We'll always have those informal conversations to just keep learning from each other. So
absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, Si, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed that. I've definitely learned something from listening to you. Really, really good session. Thank you. Dave, Paul, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, look, loads of notes. Brilliant. Okay.
Pen.
We'll see you all next week. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Si. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
See you, everyone.
Bye.